Hi there, Jennifer Foster here, owner of the EDM Academy, showing you how to master yourself for a new way to lead. I'm really happy to say that this is a video for the first ever EDM Master Class held yesterday, and it's for all students who have completed some of the courses. So the idea of the group is to keep us all in contact, to fine tune the EDM ideas and for any questions to be answered. And I'm really happy to say that last night was absolutely everything that I ever hoped for or dreamed for, even as regards exactly that's what happened. So I'd like to go straight in to talk about some of the points that were brought up. The first one was to do with the nature of energy. The second one is to do with anger. The third one is to do with leaking. And the fourth one I'm just going to add on, which is to do with faith. So here you go then, folks, and hope this summarises what we discussed, and I hope you find it useful. Energy. This came up because sometimes when people are angry, they explode, and afterwards they feel very, very quiet and very, very sad and quite exhausted. And the question is, why does this happen? Why do you feel so exhausted when you've become angry? Now, the answer to this is quite an interesting one, because people tend to think of energy as there or not there. Like a good energy is good energy, and sad energy is kind of a nothing energy, maybe even. It could be a heavy feeling of not much, just heaviness. Whereas you tend to experience good energy as having some sort of motivation and some sort of energy to get up and go. So often sad energy, grief, is thought of as being quite heavy and stationary. But the thing is that it's got just as much as energy as good energy, because energy is energy. And what's really interesting about us as human beings is that we've learned how to use sad energy in just as effective a way as good energy. And indeed, once you think about it, some people, and I'll talk more about this in a minute, are really motivated by their sad energy. So point number one is, remember that energy is energy. It doesn't matter when it comes to how much oomph it gives you or how much motivation it gives you, what type it is. Okay? So energy is energy just because it is energy. Doesn't matter when it comes to feeling it and going forward, whether it's good energy or sad energy. So when we become angry, remember that energy is from the bottles of grief that we still have stored in our stomach area. So the bottles of grief are tagged. The brain recognises the bottle of grief as something that's still there, because it recognises the situation you're in. The information is similar, so you start to go boom. You start to become angry, and I call that a tag. It's not so much a trigger, which is in the mind. This is a tag. This is a real life situation that has the same information in it as the bottle of grief that you're still carrying. So that's a tag, and it gets kind of pulled up without you thinking about it, which is why it's not mind. So you're not thinking about it, you feel it. You're a feeler, you feel it. You feel this grief in your stomach area, and the situation around you is like, hey, this is similar, anger. So that energy is brought up because of the situation you're in, and you explode with it. So afterwards, what will happen is that you will feel deflated, because that energy that was there before, that was carrying you along, albeit in a sad way, has depleted because you've just let off a lot of it. So that's why you will feel depleted after being angry. It's because the sad energy that was giving you that motivation to become angry has gone down. So you may feel exhausted because energy is still energy. So that's point number one. Very related to this was the idea of controlled anger. This was a really interesting one. So if we are not aware, we can be in situations and we become angry and we think, well, what was all that about? With the EDM model, you start to recognise what that was about. And as I said, we all know that we carry bottles of grief in our stomach area. That's from past events that we haven't got rid of yet. And in those bottles of grief is information about the event. So any event we're in the real world that's to do with that, a similar scenario, we will become angry. But if we become aware of that, we can actually start to use it. And what came up in the group was the idea of controlled anger. Now, controlled anger could be you starting to own the situation and deciding to do something about it because you're motivated by that sad grief that, if not looked at, becomes anger. But that sad grief, remember, it's still an energy. So you as a human being can focus that energy and do something about the situation. One of the examples we talked about was myself when there was an old boyfriend of mine who annoyed me for various reasons. So when he moved out, I got all of the furniture out of the house that he had put in there, and I burnt it in the back garden. Now, that wasn't because I was furiously angry. It was because I knew that every time I was in that house, I would be reminded of him and the situation, and I didn't want to do that. So instead of just being angry every time I was in the house and looking at the furniture, whether or not I was aware of it or not, instead of being angry and letting myself go through that over and over again, I went in the house, I used some of that grief, some of that energy to move the furniture into the garden, and believe me, it was quite a hard job. Moved it all into the garden, and then I set fire to it. And by doing that, it was almost a symbolic ritual. It was quite beautiful. And I took photos of it because it was quite a beautiful picture. You know, the fire was red and yellow, and it was nice. And as I watched the furniture burn, it was like saying goodbye to the to the event. And afterwards, that was that. And I went into the house, and it didn't have any reminders left in it, so I felt quite cleansed, and I'd moved on because I'd got rid of things in my real world situation that would have tagged me, because it would have reminded my brain of the situation. And I could have been sitting there having a nice time, but my brain would have noticed, oh goodness, you're still sitting here staring at that piece of furniture. That went wrong, didn't it? Bang, anger. Okay, so I used that sad grief to give me energy, to motivate me to physically move that furniture out of the house, put it in the bottom of the garden, said goodbye to it in a kind and humble way by setting fire to it because it was beautiful, and it disappeared into the ashes, and I was able to go back inside and continue to live my life, but without the anger tag. Which leads us nicely on to the idea of charity. But before I say that, sorry, one more point there. So you could use this sad energy, this controlled anger, in two ways actually. One is through creativity. So again, because I suppose I'm an artist at heart, I saw that burning furniture as an art piece. I mean, I just did. That might sound ridiculous, but I did as a person. I found that like a bit of performance art almost, that expressed the way I felt about the situation. So this sad grief could be turned into creativity to symbolise what you feel about a situation in a kind and humble way, and then it's out there, you've expressed it, and it's gone. But also it can be used to fuel a passion. And some people do this, say something really tragic happens in their lives. Sometimes they take this sad feeling, this grief, and they decide to do, sponsored runs for charity, to do with the event that caused them grief in itself. They can do all sorts of things. So lots of people use their sad grief as a passion, and then that's how they focus it, and that's how they move on and create a better world from their experience. And some people can use it as creativity. Okay, so if you do have sad grief and you do find yourself getting angry, then that's a couple of ways to look at it. There's also a course on understanding anger. This is free in the EDM Academy, although I must say you must start at the beginning because it's the second course in the program. So it leads me nicely on to rituals, because then we spoke about rituals, and rituals are really powerful for many, many reasons. But just to touch on this now, is that one reason why a ritual is powerful in the EDM model, but also generally, obviously, is because it's a form of expression. And expression, as we know from the Power Tower, is expression is a power need. So if we're expressing our knowledge, there we are, expressing our KNs. If we're expressing our knowledge, our KNs, our experience, we automatically start to feel better. Rituals do that. They can also give you a feeling of safety and of love and care, because when you're doing a ritual, you're normally doing it with other people. That gives you a feeling of more here, of belonging and meaning. Okay, so doing a ritual gives you belonging, because lots of people are doing the ritual probably. Meaning, the ritual gives meaning to your experience. It can help you process your experience. It gives you love and care because you're doing it with other people probably, and you're expressing yourself. And so that's what happens from a human being point of view with power needs. So that makes you feel really good, but it also helps you to move on through time. And it also, on a much deeper level, what it's doing is a ritual can also allow an idea that you have, which is maybe up here. So it's potential. The potential could be in the consciousness, the truth consciousness. By having an idea about that, you're connecting to that consciousness and you're having an idea about it. But to actually bring it and manifest it into this actual world as a thing, a ritual can be really handy, because a ritual, by saying it, you're bringing the words into having a form. So that idea starts to have a form in this sort of place we live, just by speaking about it. By doing a ritual, just makes you focus on it. That makes you much more likely to be able to again link in and connect to others with a similar idea, because you're manifesting it. So you're giving it a chance to come into this world as a beginning on this lower vibration, by speaking and doing things to create whatever you want to create. So that's another reason why rituals are a great thing, a very powerful thing. There's much more to rituals, obviously. I'm really skirting here from the top of the deep and meaningful ideas of rituals, but from an energy dynamic model perspective, it does increase your power tower, because of makes you feel safe, love and care, meaning, belonging and expression. Okay, and it's also ability, something you can do about something. Okay, so that's rituals. Then we talked about leaking, and this was good. When we're in an environment that's not very good for us, we can leak energy. Now, to be clear about this, what's leaking energy? Well, when you have your stick self here and you start to make good decisions and you build up your power needs, this is just a wooden way of showing how your brain works it out. Okay, so this is how it works out whether what's happening is a good or a sad thing. Once it's worked that out, the brain will give the situation a feel score, and these feel scores can be good, big white ball, I say, imagine a big white snooker ball, or they can be sad, which is a big black snooker ball, and there's lots of little snooker balls in the middle. So the two largest are here, then there's not so large, and then the ones in the middle are quite small. And I talk about this in the Understanding the Mind course, which is the 4th course in the EDM Academy. Again, it's free if you want to have a look. So the brain gives the situation you're in a feel score. And then if you imagine that feel score as balls, dark balls for sad, white balls for good, what then happens is that the balls go into your mind, because that's where they go, along with the information like letters, and then they fall down into your stomach area and they turn into water. So the dark balls turn into dark water, and the light balls, the white balls, turn into sparkling water. So you end up with a goldfish bowl of feelings, I call it, in your stomach area. Here's an example of a goldfish bowl of feelings in your stomach area that collects all the feels scores, be it them dark water because it's a sad situation, or sparkling water because it's a good situation, all bearing in mind that this is worked out from your stick self and your power needs. So I could be in a really good situation, and my fishbowl of feelings could be full up with sparkling clear water because the situation I'm in is really good, my stick self is valued, and I can show who I am in a kind and humble way. However, but if you have a hole in your goldfish bowl, which people often do, you will just leak that energy away. You will just leak that energy away. And these leaks are caused by connections to other people often, and they're also caused because of lack of a good boundary. And you may be either being too sensitive to people or not sensitive enough, or they may be too close to you or not far away enough, etc. So one thing we do in the EDM is we really study where we're leaking, because it doesn't really matter how good or bad or how hard you work at your situation and at yourself if you're leaking, because the energy will just go in and come out again. So you're literally you're just not getting anywhere. You're not getting anywhere. And it could be sometimes why people who do self-development try really hard and then still feel exhausted because they're leaking. And so in the EDM model, we can look at where you're leaking, how you're leaking, and how we can shut the door by looking at your boundaries, and also sometimes by looking at your role, spelt ROLE, because that can help with boundaries too. So there you go. So that's that. And the last thing I'd like to say is a little note on faith. Now, faith, I don't necessarily mean at all religion, but what I do mean, there has to be an assumption really that you are a unique person, and the only person who knows that is you, and you have your own experiences, you have your own wisdom, you have your own preferences, you have your own talent, and you are a unique and you could say divine person. And in one sense you could say that your stick self was your soul, and in order to manifest that soul and to protect that soul, who you are in this world, you need to build up those really protective, chunky wooden power needs. So where does faith come into it? Well, faith comes into it in the sense of, in the EDM model, is that you need to have faith that this is how people do work. You need to have faith that if they work on their power needs, they've got good boundaries so they're not leaking. You've got to have faith that your mind not only becomes smaller because it's not controlling you, but your mind becomes smaller, your mind becomes aligned into who you are, and then your spiritual self becomes in line with what you're doing. So you become much more centered, and you feel at one with yourself. You're not arguing with your mind, you're not disconnected from your spirit, you're not in separation basically. So everything is on the same page. And once you have that, you need to have faith, and I can show it in case studies from myself as well as other people, and that's what maybe we'll talk about more in the next masterclass if you want. We need to have faith that this is how we do work, and if we trust in that and work on the power needs and get our boundaries right, that our mind will calm down, and then we will start to see a way forward that we couldn't see before, and you need to have faith in that. You need to have faith that once you start to practice this, which is again why one function of the masterclass is so we can meet once a week to practice. Obviously you don't have to come every week, but it's there for you to practice. And if you do start to actually live this, then things happen that you can't even conceive of now, because everything will shift and the world changes around you because you have started to stand still. So instead of you changing yourself to fit into your situations, what you do in a kind and humble way is to say, no, I don't like that. That's no good for me. I'm going to stand here. I'm going to make sure that I'm safe, that the people around me love and care. I'm going to connect to others authentically and wisely. And once you do that, your mind will come down and reality will shift around you. And that's what you need to have faith in. You need to have faith in that. And as I said, we can talk more about that next time. But thank you for listening. I hope I've covered all the points correctly. Do let me know if you want me to say anything else, and I'll see you in the next masterclass. Thank you very much.